Well, I think people, have almost grown used to massacres in Egypt, and that's what they are. I mean, I've got to a point now where it's quite normal to walk into a mosque and count bodies on the floor. These little blood baths, and sometimes not very little, are becoming almost normal, and that's the extraordinary thing, and it doesn't seem to shock people in the way that you might think, not now anyway. It's quite normal to open your paper in the morning and to see the pictures of dead bodies. It's quite normal to hear rifle fire in this, one of the most ancient and most wonderful cities in the world. Extraordinary. And the amazing thing is that the police really have been given pretty much permission to shoot anyone they want. This is, after all, a state of emergency. I've been amazed at the promiscuous nature of the police firing, say, outside the Fatah Mosque a couple of days ago. They were even firing at motorists on the road. They were firing at my driver and myself at one point. A policeman wearing hoods, by the way. This has become a kind of normality. To see cops on checkpoint duty on the Nile Bridge just down the road from here after curfew wearing hoods is quite extraordinary.
It is. Do you think everyone in the interim government is on board with this kind of behaviour? Does everyone agree with this line that they're fighting terrorism?
Well, they're beginning to sound more and more like Bashar-Al Asad talking about his opponents, even when they were peaceful, in Syria 2.5 years ago. In fact, the language is almost identical. Terrorists, fundamentalists, extremists. I think the latest phrase that came out this morning was malicious terrorism. They're being presumably a nice kind of terrorism that we don't know about. Extraordinary language they're using, and they're demonizing this millions of people. I mean, maybe they're not a majority in Egypt, sure, the Muslim Brotherhood, but they're demonizing millions of people who are Egyptians, and they're as much, the children of Egypt as the children of General Al-Sisi are.
Absolutely, and as the international community hears this message, to what extent is it buying into it?
Most of the diplomats here, I'm told, and I try to stay away from diplomats, but most of them, I'm told, are very much aware of what's really going on, which is what I'm talking about now. Whether they say that to their foreign ministers, I don't know. But the reaction from abroad, I mean, the Egyptians are saying, how could the foreign governments treat us like this? I think the reaction from abroad is pathetic. I mean, Obama almost gave a green light to the coup when he referred to those against Morsi as, what did he say, many Egyptians, millions of Egyptians, perhaps a majority, he said. That must have made the generals smile in Egypt. And as for the EU statement, it's pathetic. I mean, they will reconsider. When's the deadline for the end of violence before the statesmen of the European Union sit down and decide that they won't give any more money to Egypt, which presumably is the blackmail being applied?
Do you think when it comes to the EU that they are fearing perhaps a mass influx of Egyptians into the EU?
Ah, yes, our wonderful frontiers of the EU, which must remain so perfect. I don't think they really think the Egyptians would do that. Rich countries like Iraq and to some extent Syria, these people can get abroad, but I don't think Egyptians have the money to get out of their country. And you've got to remember that there are vast areas of Cairo totally unaffected by the violence that's going on, so I don't think that's going to happen. But I can tell you that at military headquarters in Cairo, they won't be shaking in their boots when they read the EU statement.
Well, certainly they're not shaking in their boots, it seems, over fears that the US might cut off its military aid. I mean, it can certainly turn elsewhere, can't it, for the money?
Well, I think to keep the Egyptian military on the side with the Israeli peace agreement, they'll go on paying their $1.5 billion bribe to the Egyptian army. Where the Egyptian army would be most hurt is if someone interfered with their business dealings, since the senior officer corps in the Egyptian army is mixed up in shopping malls, banking and other large financial concerns. That would be an interesting subject to see what one could do about that if one wanted to put pressure on the military. But no, the other thing you've got to remember is Egyptians are very proud people, and there's one way of trying to bring them in on your side, and that's to accuse foreigners of interfering. And the good old foreigners will always interfere, and sure enough, that's who they're bashing. The foreigners, and of course, as you've just shown on your programme, the Western press. We inevitably get hit every time this happens.
Looking at the Muslim Brotherhood, we're hearing the Prime Minister considering this proposal to dissolve it. Is that a realistic option for the coming days, weeks?
Well, I remember when the British government banned the IRA, but the IRA did not go away in Northern Ireland, did they? I think, you see, we're following a kind of pattern which we've seen in Syria. you have an opposition, it is largely peaceful, so you bestialize it, you demonize it, you ban it, you drive it underground, and then the first act of violence, even if it's in fact not from the Brotherhood, they will be accused of it, and then they'll be called terrorists, and the world will be asked to sympathize with poor Egypt fighting the war on terror, introduced to us, of course, by our friend George W. Bush.
And if it does go on underground, it's still going to survive, isn't it? I mean, it's spent many years underground already.
I think you've got to realise you mustn't be romantic about the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, they collaborated with the British when the British controlled Egypt. They collaborated with Mubarak. They were talking to Mubarak even when he was losing power. They weren't in Tahrir Square in the January-February 2011 revolution. And they'll collaborate with who they want. And remember, we've got the Salafists, the Noor party, which got 24% in the parliamentary elections. They're backing the generals and they're backing the interim government against the Muslim Brotherhood. That, I think, is why Saudi Arabia is now prepared to give billions of dollars of aid to Egypt, because they want to keep the Salafists. They don't care very much about the Brotherhood, who might become a little too liberal for them. So you've got to realise that when you look at politics here, it pays to be a little bit cynical and don't be romantic about anyone.